Hello, welcome. I'm Molly Kitchen. And this video in particular, I'm making for the participants in a workshop that I did at Amherst College. So that workshop was called Office Overhaul, Corrective Exercises and Movements that you can integrate into your workday. And in the workshop, we had so much great theory that we actually ran out of time to practice all of the different movements that I was bringing in. And so this is going to be a brief and simple video of simple movements that you can bring into your workday. Clearly, I'm in yoga clothes right now, but I suppose you could say that's my workday clothes. But these are meant to be done, in business casual clothing and things like that. So the first part of the office overhaul, or the ways to integrate varied and new movements into your average workday, is simply a check-in or a pause. And so whether you're sitting or standing, you could do this pause by closing your eyes or softening your gaze. And here, take a few moments to notice your body. So often at work, we're more oriented in our minds, in the thinking part of who we are. And so this can be a very simple and brief pause that you could bring into your workday, no matter what you're doing. It could be about 30 seconds to a minute of checking in with your physical body, feeling your feet underneath you, feeling your seat. Also here, feel for your breathing. So this brief check-in can be a simple way of inviting yourself into your embodied experience, into your physical body. So you can open your eyes if they were closed. You might notice I'm sitting here on a nice, uncomfortable folding chair. I'll show you from the side what I'm doing in terms of my spinal alignment. So I always say chairs were meant to be manufactured easily, not meant for us to be sitting in, really, not meant for comfort in the physical body. So oftentimes what we'll do in chairs is round through the back of the pelvis and the low back. And I'm exaggerating it, but sitting something like this. And so instead, I was coming forward, so my sitting bones are more toward the edge of the chair. And in my pelvis, I'm making sure to rock forward. So here's me rocking backward. There's that rounding quality. I'm kind of on the back of my sitting bones, and I've got rounding in my lumbar spine. And instead, I'm going to sit forward. And like anything, you could overdo this and kind of be in more of a backbend shape. Instead, you just want to invite in the natural curve, the lordotic curve of your low back, the lumbar curve. So this could be a way of shifting your seat if you're sitting. I also have lots of students and participants in workshops who are like, well, I don't sit. I actually use a standing desk. And standing, we can have every bit as bad a posture as sitting. And so if you do use a standing desk, I invite you also to change your position often. Dr. Andrea Spina says the only bad posture is the one you spend too much time in. So that variation and changing things up is really something essential that our bodies are calling for. So we're going to work from the top down and head through some different movements and actions that can bring more balance into your body in your workday. So first one is some neck rotations. So sitting with a long spine, you can also do the standing for sure. Drop your chin gently toward your chest. From there, draw your chin over toward the front of your left shoulder. And then begin to lift your chin so it's more like you're looking over the left shoulder. And then think you're going to create a circle with your chin, lifting it as you rotate around. And you'll end up perhaps looking more over the right shoulder, and then draw the chin down but to the side. There's that rotation and forward flexion. And then back through center. So try one the other direction. So chin goes over toward the right shoulder. So you're still in forward flexion and you're rotating. And then begin to lift the chin, that looking over the shoulder quality, and then lift your head. And what we're looking for here is no pain. So anywhere if you get to a range of motion where there's pain, then back off. Don't do as much there. And then back down through center. And then from there, lift your head. So for many of us, I can't speak to everyone, but sort of the way that this workshop was oriented was for those who are sitting or standing in front of computers for most of the day. And when we do that, our head and our torso is facing one direction. So even just turning the head and taking a few deep breaths and then turning the head the other direction can be a great option. So you're stretching muscles on one side, you're engaging some muscles on the other side. This stuff is really simple, and some of it you'll be like, of course, do that. But then if you think too, like how often do we actually integrate these things in? So I'm highlighting some of the obvious in hopes of bringing it back to the forefront of your mind so you'll actually use it. Another thing that can happen in terms of overuse when we're using computers or screens a lot is the eyes, and the muscles around the eyes can get overused. So take your two palms and rub them together really vigorously. Really, really vigorously, so you get some warmth between your palms. You kind of sneak in a little forearm work here. And then once you feel that warmth between your palms, pause, cup your hands, and place your palms over the eye socket. So you're not actually pressing into your eyes. You're pressing around the eye socket. Take another deep breath in here. And then gently release your hands and relax your shoulders. Eyes could remain closed for a breath or two. And when you're ready, open them. So simple, but that can be a really nice reset. Another one is simply, so this would involve turning your head and then perhaps looking out a window. And that might, if you don't have a window within eyesight, you might actually get yourself up. Go find a window, look out the window, or look out the window, particularly turning your body in a position it hasn't been in. Again, super simple, but helpful. The eyes are also often looking straight forward. So one exercise is moving the eyes around. This is usually done with the eyes closed. So try closing your eyes. And then imagine that you're looking up. So head stays straight forward, but the eyes look up. You can imagine that this is 12 o'clock. And then slowly take the eyes over so they're looking at your imaginary clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And be gentle here, because if you're really straining the eye muscles, you can sometimes give yourself little headaches. So 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, and 10, 11, 12. And try that one time going backwards now. So move slowly enough that you're actually engaging the muscles in each of those positions. And just note if you're starting to get any sort of strain in the eyes, you might back off a little. And then relax your eyes like as though you're looking forward, even though eyes are closed. And then gently open your eyes. Good. All right, so from there we can head to the shoulders. I'm going to stand up for these ones. Move my chair aside. So shoulders, the simplest one is shoulder rolls, which I feel like is really common to see done. And oftentimes when we do shoulder rolls, we're also kind of moving the torso and maybe not moving the scapula, the shoulder blades as much. So try and keep the torso neutral and gently squeeze the shoulder blades together. You can see on my back they're squeezing in. I'm trying to do that without popping the ribs forward. And then draw your shoulders up towards your ears, elevate them. Then keep them up and round them forward. Again, I'm trying to do that without rounding my back, just drawing the scapula wide. And then keep them forward, draw them down. So we're just isolating these actions. And again, you'd want to do this in such a way where there's no pain for you. Try switching, going forward, up, back, and down. And really start to feel for your scapula moving on your back. This part of the shoulder joint can sometimes get really sticky and kind of stuck, or can only move in certain positions there on the back of your ribs. So we're trying to free that up in those directions. Another fun thing to try out is uncoupling the shoulders. So when I roll my shoulders, I'm rolling both back. Now I'm just going to roll. You can try rolling your right shoulder back. And then pause. And roll your left shoulder forward. And I feel like this is one that's good for working out your brain as well. So roll your right shoulder back and your left shoulder forward. If it didn't work the first time, I'll tell you it took me a while. And then if you get it one direction, then switch and go the other way. That always takes me a little extra time. So you're rolling one shoulder forward, the other shoulder back. Good. And once you have a go there, wiggle out, relax through your shoulders. One more that I'll show you this one seated so you can really see what actions are happening in my shoulders and my arms. This is called swimmer arms. So start by taking your arms out wide. And from your inner armpits, gently externally roll your arms. Your palms might turn up, but have it come from your shoulders. From there, bend your elbows and take your hands behind your head to hover. Your hands might be really wide. They might be crossed over one another. Just check in. And again, this is a place where you don't want any sense of pain here or pinching. And then from here, take the arms wide. From your armpits, internally rotate. Bend your elbows and take your hands behind your back like so. And again, they might be nice and crossed over. They might be wider. You're just working with your range of motion. From there, take the arms out wide. Externally rotate. Bend the elbows, hover your hands behind your head. Try and do this without coming into a back bend so you're not flaring or changing your torso. You're isolating the movement to your arms and shoulders. Internally rotate. Bend your elbows, hands behind your back. Good. Take the arms out wide. Externally rotate and then release and relax through your arms. So the work that you're doing there is rotating your humerus bone, your upper arm bone, within the shoulder socket. So it's the glenohumeral joint. And as long as you're working within a range of motion where there's no pain, you can really start to build strength through that whole range of motion through those actions. And that's something that we're often not doing just in a regular modern world workday. So that was swimmer arms. Up next is a standing twist. So this one is, rather than isolating, it's kind of a whole body action. So a standing twist, very simple. You're going to take your feet a little wider than hip distance, bend your knees a little bit, and sway your arms around your body. Some people really love to do this with like wrapping your arms around your torso. Others like to do it without even touching the torso. So just see what feels right for you. And one key here is as you twist one direction, you're going to lift the opposite heel so that your ankle and knee joint and your hip joint turn with you. And you could also try taking an arm up over the opposite shoulder. And that might take your twist a little bit higher in your thoracic spine. Good. So standing twist. One of my favorite things to do, which may or may not be appropriate in your workplace, but I just highly recommend for all of us humans, is to wiggle and shake. So give yourself a little wiggle here. If you've ever been to my yoga class, you know we do this pretty often. You could bounce, shake out through your limbs, get a little wiggle going. So the idea here is just a full body release, which we don't, as adults, do all that often. So there's a little wiggle shake. From there, we're going to get into the spine. So I'm going to sit for this one as well. And the reason I'm going to sit for this is because the hips will often want to move here. So try sitting down and keeping your pelvis and your hips still. So you're not going to roll back or rock forward. And then cross your arms in front of your chest. And flex your spine, so round forward, but remember your pelvis stays just like it is. And this one's going to be really nice and gentle and pretty subtle. So keeping yourself forward, come over toward your left side. So it's in forward flexion and rotation. And then start to lean over to the left, drawing right shoulder back. Begin to come into extension. So lean your head back. Remember, pelvis stays right where it is. You're going to go over toward the other side. Once you're in the side bend, round forward, flexion and rotation, and then back through center. So the attempt here is to move through all of your vertebra and through all the different actions of the spine. Flexion, extension, rotation, and lateral extension and flexion, side bending. So try it the other way. So turn toward the right leg, and then more into the side bend, and then into the back bend. You can think of rippling up each of your vertebra over to the other side, into forward flexion, and around. And I always want to keep reiterating, you can release your arms. Really do what you can do without pain. So we're not going to convince our bodies to go into different or new ranges of motion if we keep kind of hitting right up against something that's painful. So pain signals are important to listen to, and if we can respect them, then usually gradually, bit by bit, as we gain strength, mobility, and connection of the brain to the body, the range of motion will increase and the pain will decrease. The other great one for the spine is a spinal roll. So here, let's get there through going through a little bit about the hips. So bend your knees a little bit and draw your sitting bones back and the front points, the ASIS, the anterior superior iliac spine, forward. This is an anterior tilt of your pelvis. I'm exaggerating it. You can exaggerate it as long as there's no pain in your lumbar spine. And then let's do a posterior tilt. So sitting bones tuck under and front bones, ASIS bones, go back. There's a posterior tilt. And then try that back and forth. It's a little bit easier to do with the knees bent. Ideally, we're somewhere in between there where we're pretty balanced between the front and the back. But it's good to know how to do both of these things to articulate. And then from here, we're going to try a hip hinge, which for most of us requires a little bit more of that anterior tilt. And then begin to bring your spine forward. So here's what I will often see people do. This. Don't do that for now. For now, keep the spine long and hinge at your hips. So my spine, my torso is coming along for the ride as my hips hinge. There comes a point where I can no longer do that, keeping my spine long. And so from there, I am going to round and flex my spine. So we could come back up with a hip hinge, hands to hips, coming back into spinal extension, and then unhinging. And the other thing we could do, here's my hip hinge forward, and then I'm going to round forward or flex forward. From there, I could try bending my knees, and then rolling up. Here's the spinal roll. I'm going to attempt to do this vertebra by vertebra, stacking one on top of the next, on top of the next. So my head's going to be the last to rise. As long as there's no pain when you do that, particularly we don't want any extra compression through the lumbar spine. But as long as there is no pain there, that can be an excellent way to really communicate with your lumbar spine. So the the hip hinge, and then the spinal rolls. So from there, I want to work a little bit with hip range of motion. So for these, I'm going to keep my pelvis now steady. And standing on one leg, let's say standing on the left leg, I'll draw my right knee in. And I'm only going to lift it so high as I can do that without hitching up the right hip. From there, I'm going to draw the knee wide, but only so far as I can keep my 2 hip points, or pelvic points, pointing forward. From there, I'm going to internally rotate my thigh bone and take the leg back, and then draw the knee up. The other hip rotation starts going back. This one's always the hardest one for me. It's external rotation and a lift up. And then draw the knee in and set the leg down. And ideally you do more. You do maybe 3 to 5 on each side. So I'll show on the other side these hip rotations again. And these hip circles are really about exploring the range of motion that you currently have and making sure you're using all of it. The slower you go, the more you are going to build strength and mobility throughout the whole range of motion. Strength and mobility combined equals resiliency. It means your body owns the movements rather than just like flexibility where you might be able to push yourself into that position but not do it by lifting the leg, let's say. Whew. And even just a few of these, I do these almost every single day. Even just a couple, I can really feel the stabilizing muscles on my outer hips working. And, in the middle of our workday, if we're not using the body that much, that can be such a gift in terms of adding in movement to the workday and for our bodies. So there's the hip circles, range of motion. I'm making sure I'm not forgetting anything looking at my notes over here. Yes, so let's do, this one's kind of fun. It looks like a weird dance move. Again, hopefully that's something that's allowed in your workplace. So I'm gonna have my feet about hip distance apart. I'm gonna bend my knees and place my hands on my knees. And then from there, this is gonna be a combination. So this is not super isolated either. This is gonna be using quite a few joints, but we're gonna explore range of motion in the knees and then also in the ankles. So draw your knees forward and to the right. Good, and only go so far forward as there's 1, no pain, and 2, your heels are still on the floor. And then draw them forward through center, over to the left, and back around. And then you can do that a little bit quicker, and a little bit quicker, and hopefully you're doing it slow enough so that you are really articulating through the ankles and through the knees. Good, so many people have said to me, but Molly, you're a yoga teacher, and in yoga they always tell me don't take your knee past your ankle. Well, I've heard that as well, and I think it's not very healthy. Because if we never take the knee past the ankle, if we only train the knee, let's say in a lunge, with the knee directly over the ankle, then that's the only place where we get strong. And the example I always get living in New England is that some nice February day, we're going to be out walking around on the sidewalk, and it's going to be slick, and we're going to slip, and our knee is going to come forward in front of our ankle. And if we've never trained there, if we've never taught the body how to be strong and stable in that position, then indeed we might hurt our knee or hurt our ankle. If we've trained there and we've really put in some effort to gain strength and mobility, there's that combination. We want strength, but we also want to actively own the ranges of motion, of mobility that we have in any of these given positions. Then we have resiliency, and hopefully it won't lead to an injury. Maybe it's just a little slip and you're fine. So that's why I say train in all the ways as long as there's no pain. And if there is pain, then you work your way up to it. So those were knee and ankle circles. So I want to talk a little bit about stretching and strengthening the calves. The calves and the quads and the hamstrings. Some big muscle groups in the legs. So quadriceps on the front of the thighs, hamstrings back of the thighs, calves back of the lower leg. So the first thing you can add in very simply in your workday is a quadricep stretch. And so one thing I'll note here is that oftentimes when people do a quadricep stretch, their knee will actually be in front of their other leg and in front of their hip. So look down if you're doing a quadricep stretch and make sure the knee's right under the hip. And then if you're drawing the heel in pretty closely, draw it toward the outer hip, toward the outer edge. So simple quadricep stretch. Again, super simple, quite effective. For hamstrings, one thing that you might do is the opposite. So I was just here. From here, I could go here. Because the knee is bent, it's not so much of a quadricep stretch here, but doing a simple extension of the leg can both stretch the quadriceps. You might be able to feel that if you're doing it. And then if you lower down slowly, you can also use the muscles of the of the hamstrings. And if you lift up, you're using your quadriceps too. And lower. You're using those muscles to help you do those actions. The other way that hamstrings in particular really get engaged is extending the leg back. And try to do this without coming into a big back bend, so pelvis stays steady. And in some sense here, I'm actually trying to engage the hamstrings. If you have particularly stretchy or lengthened hamstrings, actually efforting to engage them is really useful. And of course, your hamstrings might be engaging along with your gluteus muscles. That's great. Last one for the calves, just doing circles for the ankles can be a nice release, not just for the calves, but also for the top of the ankle and shin there. And then I don't really have a perfect wall here, but simply a calf stretch with the toes up a steady surface, such as if this chair were more steady, or up a wall, can be very useful. And you just want to be mindful of what the rest of your body is doing when you're doing that stretch. All right, we're getting down to the feet. So, you might have noticed I don't have shoes on. And you might not be able to do that at your place of work. And so one thing I encourage you to do is really think through, are there times in the day where I could go shoeless? Going shoeless is a wonderful way to increase movement and to make the quality of your movement better, because our feet are the foundation of everything. They're this tiny little real estate that we are placing then the rest of our bodies on most of the time. So sitting or standing, place your feet on the floor. We'll do a little bit for the toes. So press your 4 little toes down and lift your big toes up. And if nothing happened, that's okay. Keep concentrating and try to lift those big toes up. And then switch. So press the big toes down, try and lift the 4 little guys up. Again, if nothing happens, you can will it to happen. Some students will even bring their hands down and actually lift them up. And then switch back and forth slowly a few times. You can probably see here, I have the connection of my fingers to my toes, so my hands are doing funny things. Note if that's happening for you too. It does for many folks. So if this is barely happening for you or not happening at all, but you're really putting some effort in, the effort is the good part. So the more you effort to connect your brain, your neurology, with this part of your body, with your toes, your biology, the more you'll strengthen the neuroreceptors, and you'll start to gain a better understanding, better capacity to connect these parts of the body. I have a hard time doing it and speaking about something else at the same time. Good. So another thing you can do here is just a stretch for the top of the foot. It's kind of like the opposite of a calf stretch. So I'm pressing the top of my foot down and extending through top of the ankle and shin. That can be a great one. The other thing to do, I actually don't have any of my yoga tune-up balls with me today, but you can do this with a tennis ball. I've gotten balls just like at Acme Surplus for like 2 for $1 sort of thing, bouncy balls, things like that. Take a ball, you put it under the sole of your foot, whether you have socks on or not, and you roll it around. And by doing that rolling action under the soles of the feet, you're waking up the proprioceptive capacity of the soles of your feet. And you're also, in some ways, rolling out some of the myofascial connections, so some of the connective tissue connections in the soles of the feet. It can be so useful in relieving the tense nature of the feet because they've often been stuffed in shoes all day and haven't had a lot of movement capacity. The last one I'll say for the feet is simply giving yourself a little foot massage. Again, this might be like on your lunch break, something like that. But think of the times during your workday when you might be able to give this part of your body that really works so diligently. Our feet really work so consistently for us most of the time, and is really pretty confined most of the time as well. Can really give that part of your body some love and attention. So the last thing we'll end with is sort of a bookend to how you started. So we started with the pause and the check-in, and we'll end with simply breathing awareness. So sitting or standing, you may choose to close your eyes. Begin to turn your attention to your breathing. Often when our minds are not focused on our breath, we breathe more shallowly, or sometimes we have habit patterns that aren't the best for us, where we just breathe kind of shallowly into the chest. So think of this as a global breath, and the globe is your whole torso. So each time you inhale, think of breathing not just into the chest or the belly, but into the sides and the back. And each time you exhale, think of this three-dimensional releasing, relaxing, maybe even a little compression at the end of each exhalation. When you're ready, you can open your eyes if they were closed. And we'll finish up this time just with me saying thank you for taking the time to learn some possibilities for bringing in more movement, through movement, more wellness into your workday. And if you'd like to find more, I do have an online studio. You can find all the details at mollykitchen.com. Thanks so much for practicing with me, and I hope you take good care.